Welcome to Rescue Paws Stories, your go-to place for heartwarming and emotional humans and animals stories. Part 1. The Dog in the Rain. It was a dreary Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the skies seemed to sag with sorrow, and the rain fell like the earth itself was mourning. Officer Lena Rodriguez sat in her patrol car at the edge of County Road 47, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying to finish the last of her paperwork. The windshield wipers swept rhythmically, smearing streaks of grey across the glass. Everything about the day felt slow, wet and heavy, until she saw him. A dog. Soaked to the bone, limping frantically across the road. He wasn't just wandering. He was running with purpose, stumbling, slipping in the mud, pausing every few steps to look back, then forward, then directly at her cruiser. His fur was matted with rain and grime, one ear torn and flattened against his head, his eyes wide with something more than fear. Urgency. Lena's heart lurched. She opened the door and stepped out into the rain. The dog, a medium-sized shepherd mix with trembling legs, skidded toward her, then stopped inches from her boots. He barked once, sharp, high-pitched, broken. Then he turned and looked over his shoulder toward the woods, let out a distressed whine, and looked back again. "Hey, boy. What's going on?" Lena said gently, crouching down. The dog backed up a few paces, then barked again, more forcefully. He seemed to be pleading, desperate. It was then that Lena noticed something else. Blood on his back paw, fresh, and on his side, embedded in the wet fur, something dark and sticky. She grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Rodriguez. I've got an injured dog on County 47. Looks like he's trying to lead me somewhere. I'm going to follow on foot. Keep me logged." "Copy that," the dispatcher replied. "Proceed with caution." Lena followed the dog as he limped across the road and down a muddy embankment. The forest swallowed them quickly. Raindrops tapped the leaves like whispers, and the sound of distant thunder rolled low and deep. The dog kept looking back to make sure she was following, and when Lena fell too far behind, he would stop and bark until she caught up. And then, 20 yards in, she saw it. A crashed vehicle, nearly invisible under the downed tree branches, tilted sideways in a ditch. A silver SUV, roof crumpled, wheels still spinning slightly in the mud. The front windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks. Lena rushed to the car, her breath caught in her throat. Inside, barely conscious, was a woman slumped over the steering wheel. In the back seat, a toddler was strapped in, crying silently. Smoke curled from the hood, and a faint smell of leaking fuel stung her nostrils. Lena's voice burst into her radio. "Dispatch! I've got a serious accident down a ditch off County 47. Requesting full emergency response, possible spinal injuries and a toddler in distress. I need road closure now. Repeat, close the road now. This is a critical rescue." "Copy that, Officer Rodriguez. Units en route. EMS notified. Roadblock initiated." As she smashed the passenger window with her baton and began pulling the door open, the dog sat nearby, silent now, but alert, his eyes locked on hers. He had found help, and he had saved them. But Lena had no idea that this was only the beginning, that this dog, nameless and broken, had a much deeper story to tell. Part 2. The Name Under the Collar. The rain kept falling in thick sheets as Lena dragged the woman out of the shattered SUV and gently laid her on the wet grass. The toddler was next, crying, but safe. Her chubby arms wrapped tightly around Lena's neck as she was lifted free of the crushed vehicle. Just moments later, paramedics burst through the woods with stretchers and gear, their flashlights slicing through the gloom. As EMTs worked quickly to stabilize the injured woman and assess the child, Lena turned back to the dog. He hadn't moved. He stood just a few feet away, watching her with those glassy eyes, his body trembling from cold and exhaustion. The blood on his leg had darkened, his gait was slower, and yet he didn't ask for anything. Not food, not comfort. His entire being was still focused on the car, as if he wasn't sure it was really over. Lena stepped closer. "You did something incredible, buddy." She reached out slowly, and this time he didn't flinch. Her hand touched his soaked fur, and he collapsed into her touch with a shaky sigh, like a soldier finally surrendering after the mission was done. That's when she noticed it. Around his neck, buried under tangled fur, was a worn collar. She knelt and gently rotated the small, rusted tag. The letters were faint, but still legible. "Benny. If found, return to Rachel and Lila Garrison." She froze. Rachel Garrison. That was the name the EMT had shouted when checking the unconscious woman's license. Lena's eyes widened. "You're the dog," a paramedic standing nearby overheard. "Wait, this dog was in the crash?" "No," Lena whispered. "He wasn't. He came to me. Limped over a mile in the EMT's face went pale. Then how the hell did he know where to find you?" That question hung heavy in the air. Back on the road, police had cordoned off the area. News vans had arrived, tipped off by the unusual call. Dog leads police to crash. Road shut down by emergency order. Reporters stood behind yellow tape, eyes wide, as emergency responders carried the woman and child up the slope to waiting ambulances. But Benny didn't move. Even as the paramedics prepped to leave, even as Lena called to him softly, he wouldn't follow. Instead, he padded slowly back to the edge of the trees, stared at something in the underbrush, and sat. Lena followed his gaze. There, half hidden beneath the leaves, was a second collar. No dog, just the collar. A red leather band, torn at the buckle, stained with blood. It had no tag, just a military insignia etched into the side. Lena's stomach turned. She looked at Benny. "You weren't just running for help, were you? You were running from something." He let out a single, hollow bark, then lay down beside the collar and buried his head in the dirt. Behind her, Lena heard a voice call from dispatch. "Officer Rodriguez, we've got an update." That SUV wasn't reported stolen, but it was listed in a federal alert 3 days ago. Classified transport. The woman inside, Rachel Garrison, was on a witness protection list. "We're patching you through to Homeland now." Lena's blood ran cold. Benny had just led her into the middle of something much, much bigger. And someone, or something, might already be watching. Part 3. The collar that didn't belong. Officer Lena Rodriguez stood frozen beside the red collar as the rain eased to a steady drizzle. Her fingers trembled slightly as she knelt to pick it up. It was heavier than it looked, the metal insignia cool against her palm. Military grade, definitely. But it was the smear of dried blood on the buckle that unnerved her the most. Benny hadn't brought them to just a crash site. He'd brought them to a scene. A crime scene. She glanced back at Benny, whose eyes hadn't left the spot where she found the collar. His body was still, but his jaw clenched slightly, and when Lena tried to coax him toward the road again, he stood up and turned deeper into the woods. "What are you trying to show me now?" Lena muttered. She hesitated. Standard protocol was to wait for backup before advancing, but everything about this night had already broken protocol. She radioed in quickly. "Dispatch, this is Rodriguez. I'm following the canine deeper into the tree line. Send backup to my GPS location and alert tactical. This may be connected to a federal protection detail gone bad." "Copy that, Officer Rodriguez. Proceed with caution." Benny moved slowly, favoring his right leg but determined. He led her past the brush where the collar had been hidden down a slope thick with vines and wet moss. A few hundred yards ahead, he paused at a fallen tree, sniffed, and then started pawing frantically at the mud beside it. Lena crouched, shining her flashlight. That's when she saw it. A man's hand, pale, stiff, reaching from under the soil. She jumped back instinctively, then leaned in again. The fingers were curled around something, a key fob with a small silver emblem, a lion's head. She gently uncurled his fingers and pocketed the device in a small evidence bag. The man had a tactical vest beneath his civilian clothes, body armor. A patch on the shoulder read, U.S. Marshals. Lena's throat tightened. A federal agent. Dead. Buried, shallow, hidden. "Benny," she whispered. "What did you survive?" Before she could stand, Benny let out a growl so low and guttural it seemed to vibrate through the trees. He stepped in front of her, hackles rising. Lena followed his gaze. A shadow moved between the pines. Then another. Voices, muted but unmistakable. Male, sharp, moving toward them. Lena reached for her gun and whispered into her shoulder radio. Code red. Armed suspects in the forest, requesting immediate air and ground support. Officer and civilian canine in danger. Benny didn't wait. He nudged Lena hard and took off in a zigzag sprint, forcing her to follow as they cut through the trees. Gunfire cracked behind them, short bursts that echoed like thunder. A bullet struck the bark beside Lena, spraying her with splinters. They ran blindly, heart pounding, adrenaline burning, until they reached a ravine with a trickling creek at the bottom. Benny leapt first, stumbling on his landing, and Lena followed, sliding down the muddy slope and landing hard beside him. "Easy," she whispered, pulling him close. "You're not losing more blood on my watch." She tore fabric from her undershirt and wrapped his leg as best she could. The old dog didn't whimper, just laid his head on her lap and stared up at her, with eyes that carried too much pain. From the top of the ravine, flashlights passed overhead. The men, whoever they were, didn't follow. For now. Lena sat against the cold rocks, heart racing, clutching her gun with one hand and Benny with the other. Somehow, this dog had escaped a murder, led police to a hidden crash, saved a mother and child, uncovered a buried marshal, and now the people who wanted him dead were still out there. But Lena wasn't backing down. "I don't know who you were trained by, Benny," she whispered, "but I promise you this. They messed with the wrong dog." And she meant it. Because tomorrow, the case would go public, and the hunt for whoever tried to erase Benny's family was just beginning. Part 4. A Name from the Shadows. The sun rose pale and slow over the horizon, bleeding gold through the skeletal trees as Officer Lena Rodriguez crouched beside the makeshift tent the department had hastily set up for her and Benny. Overnight, state troopers, federal agents, and even a Homeland Security task force had flooded the area. The road was cordoned off in every direction for 10 miles. Drones buzzed overhead. SWAT combed the forest with K9s and thermal imaging. And somewhere in the middle of it all was Benny, sleeping fitfully beside Lena's boot. He whimpered softly in his dreams, one leg twitching, the bandaged one still soaked through from his earlier sprint. A trauma specialist from Animal Rescue had offered to take him in for surgery, but Lena refused. "Not until I know he's safe. He stays with me," she'd said. The team hadn't argued. No one questioned her anymore, not after what Benny had uncovered. Beside her, a young federal agent named Ethan Crowley flipped through the evidence files they'd pulled from the scene. Photos of the collar, the key fob with the lion emblem, and finally, a name that had surfaced after running facial ID on the buried man. Marshal Adam Keller. Missing for 3 weeks. He was part of a witness protection unit, Crowley said. voice low. According to this, he was relocating a family under high-level threat. Last ping from his phone came from a safe house, 12 miles from here. Guess what wasn't there when the feds arrived? Lena looked up. The family. Gone. House ransacked. Blood on the floor. Whoever hit them knew exactly where they were hiding. Crowley leaned back. But here's where it gets weird. The woman, Angela Lyons, was married to a defense contractor who died mysteriously in an accident last year. Some of his work included, let's just say, off-books projects for the Pentagon. So the family was a target, Lena said, connecting the pieces aloud. And Keller died trying to protect them. But how does a dog survive that, and then find us? Crowley gave a small, respectful glance toward Benny. That dog isn't just any dog. His chip came back early this morning. Military issue, just like the collar. His real name is Shadow. Shadow. Trained by Fort Ravenshield, one of the elite K-9 units used in Black Ops. But his records were erased. Scrubbed clean last year. Crowley paused. Which means someone high up didn't want him found or remembered. Lena turned to Benny. No, Shadow. And suddenly, everything about him made a terrifying kind of sense. His intelligence, his unrelenting drive, his refusal to stop until help arrived. Shadow hadn't just escaped. He had carried out the mission himself. She reached down, gently stroking his ear. You're not just a survivor, are you? You're the last line of defense. At that moment, a field agent ran up to them, holding a phone. Ma'am, we've got something. You need to hear this. The agent played the audio. A voicemail recovered from Angela Lyons' emergency satellite phone. Static hissed for a moment. Then came a panicked whisper. They found us. Keller's down. I've sent Shadow with the collar. If anyone gets this, please. They know about Project Helix. They know we have the files. Don't trust anyone. Not even... The line cut out. Gunshots. Screams. Silence. Lena felt her blood run cold. Project Helix? Crowley looked grim. A black program supposedly shut down years ago. Bioweapons. Human testing. Rumor was the whistleblower had hidden data files that could take down some very big people in DC. Maybe Angela had them. Maybe that's why she was targeted. Lena stood slowly. So we're not just looking for murderers, she said, her voice like ice. We're looking at a cover-up, a high-level one, and the only living witness is this dog. Shadow stirred at her feet, eyes slowly opening. For a moment, they just stared at one another. Then, weakly but deliberately, he rose to his paws and limped forward, looking past the road, past the agents, into the tree line once more. Where are you going? Lena asked. Shadow turned back, then took 2 steps, then 3. He wasn't finished. Wait, Crowley called, but Lena was already moving. She grabbed her coat, her badge, her gun, and whispered to Shadow, "Lead the way." Because if the dog still had something left to show them, it meant someone was still out there, and time was running out. Part 5. The final trail. Shadow led them. His steps were slow but deliberate, as though every movement cost him something. But the mission overrode pain. The cold wind bit through the trees, ruffling his fur, and Officer Lena Rodriguez followed in silence, her hand never leaving the grip of her sidearm. Agent Crowley kept pace behind her, glancing nervously at the dense woods ahead. The team remained behind at the perimeter, per Lena's command. If this is still active, I don't want to spook whoever's left. Shadow knows how to get us there. We let him lead. About 20 minutes into the trek, they came to a rocky clearing near the base of a ridge. Trees formed a tight wall on one side, while a small stream, half-frozen, trickled quietly beside them. And then Shadow stopped, abrupt, still, ears raised high. He began sniffing the air with deep, deliberate breaths. Then, without warning, he growled. A low, guttural sound. Lena's hand immediately went up. "Down!" she whispered. They crouched behind a fallen tree as Lena scanned the clearing. Nothing moved until Crowley pointed. "There," he said, "behind the rocks." A faint shimmer, a glint like the reflection of glass. Lena raised her binoculars. Her heart stopped. A sniper scope. "Jesus," she breathed. We almost walked straight into it. Shadow remained perfectly still, staring in the exact direction of the hidden shooter. His body was tensed, not in fear, but recognition. He knew the presence, and he wasn't afraid. He barked once. The shot never came. Instead, there was movement, a flicker of hesitation, and then a voice, almost inaudible, crackled through a hidden earpiece Crowley had tapped into earlier through the buried transmitter on Shadow's collar. It had reconnected with a satellite relay just minutes ago. "Target is not neutralized. The dog, it's alive. Abort. I repeat, abort. New directive coming in." They exchanged glances. Someone out there had just pulled the plug. "But why?" Crowley whispered. "They're watching us." "Listening?" "Then let them," Lena muttered. She stepped out slowly, weapon drawn but lowered, and shouted toward the trees. "We know about Keller. We know about Angela Lyons. You want to silence this? You're too late." No answer. Only silence. Then, Shadow barked again, loud and insistent. He sprinted forward despite his limp, vanishing around the curve of the ridge. Lena and Crowley followed, heartbeats pounding like drums. And there, nestled beneath a canopy of twisted oaks, stood a dilapidated hunting shack, barely standing. Its door hung half off its hinges. Smoke curled faintly from a buried chimney pipe. It looked abandoned. But Shadow didn't hesitate. He charged forward and scratched wildly at the door, barked again. Loud, urgent. Lena rushed forward and threw the door open. And inside, she froze. A woman lay huddled in the corner, wrapped in blood-stained blankets, clutching a hard drive and a pistol that barely stayed in her trembling hand. Her eyes were wild with fear, but when they saw Shadow, they widened with tears. "Shadow," she whispered. "Angela Lyons. Alive." She dropped the gun and reached for the dog, sobbing as he limped into her arms and rested his head on her chest like a child coming home. She cradled him like he was the last good thing left in the world. "I thought they killed you. I thought you were gone." Lena stepped in, carefully. "Angela Lyons, I'm Officer Rodriguez. You're safe now. We know about the project. We know what happened." Angela slowly looked up, shaking with exhaustion and relief. "I have proof," she whispered. "Everything. Names, locations, codes. But you have to protect him. He saved me. I couldn't run with the drive, but I knew Shadow would find help." She handed Lena the hard drive, hands trembling. "They won't stop. Not until this is burned to the ground." Lena nodded, sealing the drive in her vest. "They're going to try, but now the world's going to know." Outside, the forest remained silent, but above, the faint sound of helicopters began to build. Reinforcements, medical units, media vans. The truth, long buried, was about to rise, and at the center of it all was a military dog who disobeyed orders, who ran into the unknown, who begged for help when no one else could. Shadow hadn't just saved a life, he had saved the truth.